Did you know that Google personalizes many searches by city and Also Asked is the only tool to access live People Also Asked data at city level? Try for free at alsoasked.com.
Tired of SEO guesswork? Quadra's AI agent goes deeper to uncover high-impact optimizations and completes hours of SEO in minutes. Get started now.
I was going to say that SEO with Fat Joe is as peaceful as this, but then the birds are all having fights.
Hello everyone, well, that was a lovely warm welcome, thank you very much. As Lee said, I'm Al Ward, lovely to meet you. Bit of a confession before we get started, I'm not an SEO expert, and you might think it odd that I've decided to stand up on stage and talk in front of you all today. What I want to do is I want to tell you a story about a headless storefront implementation my team did a while back that didn't go very well, to be honest with you. And they say that success is a terrible teacher, and whoever they are absolutely spot on, because it was so terrible that I want you all to learn from our mistakes, and you will leave here today with 4 tips or 4 steps that you can use when embarking on a project like this for yourselves, so you can avoid the same miserable mistakes that we did. I want to take you back to a time about 3 or 4 years ago, and about a week after launch of a composable commerce site with a prominent UK client of ours. Now, I'm not going to name my client, that would be career suicide, so they're going to remain anonymous. And for the purposes of this talk, they are a national retailer of pens and pencils, imaginatively called Pens and Pencils. Now, about a year of like really hard work, and almost £1 million worth of investment, we'd launched the site. Everyone was taking a breath. We thought we were going to be able to start spending some time with our families and our friends, and then we got this report. Now, let me make it easy for you. There's about 39% drop in organic traffic, which is huge. And actually, that's being a little bit too generous. If you look at the previous seasonal peak, it's actually more like a 50% drop, which is massive. Now, where did we go wrong? Well, we're asking that question ourselves massively. And you can imagine that the shine of a brand new release and an opportunity to celebrate had well and truly rubbed off, and we were hugely on the back foot. The biggest mistake that we made, or the biggest thing, was actually more of a blind spot. We didn't actually know what we didn't know about SEO, and specifically technical SEO. And like myself, most commerce systems integrators are not SEO experts. And certainly, this would have played a massive role in what we were doing. So Conway's Law is a principle that describes, as it says here, a link between the communication structures of an organisation and the systems and solutions they design. Put another way, clients normally have their SEO and their commerce existing in 2 completely different parts of their organisation. SEO in marketing and commerce somewhere else entirely. And rarely do those 2 things overlap. Now, before we go into the detail a little bit more, I'm going to take you on a bit of a sidetrack, but I'm sure you've all had the calamitous launch under your belt at some point in your career, and if you haven't, you will do it at some point. So just remember how painful that was. And I'm going to take you through a little bit of information that gives you a bit of context about what I'm about to say. Now, when preparing this talk, Andrea said to me, assume previous or prior knowledge, but I just want to double check. So you're going to have a show of hands of those that are familiar or have experienced composable commerce in their day-to-day. Even less than I thought. Does everybody know what headless is? Even less, crikey. Well, that's actually no surprise. So I'm going to tell you a little about those 2 concepts in a moment. I was actually going to I was expecting a bigger show of hands, and I was going to ask one of you to explain to the room what headless was. Missed that opportunity, sadly. So modern composable commerce has been growing, composable commerce has been growing in popularity over the last few years. And really, really simply put, it's a load of individual services or tech platforms that manage commerce, content, payments and loyalty, and they communicate through a headless front end, or the storefront, which is the website that users will end up using to interact and buy your products, through APIs and middlewares. Now, there are loads of pros and cons to this setup, and honestly, that's a completely different talk. But very, very quickly, some of the pros here are that a client can actually choose, or a brand can choose, the best possible content management system on the market, or the best possible solutions for all of these, as opposed to buying whatever content management system a monolithic service has. On the flip side, maybe they're starting out and they just want a content management system that just does what they need for the moment. And as they outgrow that, they can very easily disconnect it and reconnect a new one without affecting the entire tech stack too significantly. Now, going back to that horrible first week, what did we learn? Where did we go wrong? And obviously this is with the benefit of hindsight, and I'll come back to the impact this all had and the time it took to resolve these things towards the end of the talk. Now, there were 4 main areas. First was we generally didn't understand the impacts that single-page applications would have on SEO. It was our first big headless project, so it was our first big composable project, and most of the times we'd be doing things behind logged-in paywalls, logged-in states and things like that. The second one, our PLPs and PDPs were missing core information. I'll talk about that in a moment. The third, our content architecture and categorization was too high level. Yes, we had pens and we had pencils, but we didn't have drawing pens and coloring pens and writing pens. And we had a very complicated relationship between national and local stock. So whilst there was stock available nationally, when someone went to buy a product in their local branch, it was out of stock. And collectively, all these things obviously had a big impact. Now, each of these are talking amongst themselves. So today I'm going to focus on single-page applications or SPAs because it had the biggest impact on our organic search traffic. And also I think it's probably going to be most impactful for you all here today. What is a single-page application? Apologies if I'm teaching you all to suck eggs, but an easy way to describe this is a multi-page application essentially is every single page on your site is self-contained HTML, has a URL, all the content is in there. Whereas a single-page application, you can effectively load the entire site under one URL if you wanted to. You wouldn't normally, but you can do that to explain a point. And all the components, like your mega nav and your footers and repeatable components, all sit on a back end, and they're served via APIs to the front end. And it allows you to then serve the same content essentially to different experiences, whether it be mobile, desktop, wearables, or even point-of-sale in stores. Now, single-page applications are JavaScript, and that poses a significant challenge for SEO. And these are the 3 main areas that causes the most important challenges. These are all interconnected at a high level, and as I mentioned, SPAs can basically have the entire site under one URL. So if we don't force the single-page application to behave like a multi-page application, crawling is going to be a big issue. If we build URLs, we can render the JavaScript, or Google can render the JavaScript, but it won't press buttons. So if we've got content hiding behind interactions, it's not going to see everything that we want it to see. And if we build out the URLs for the site and the JavaScript renders incorrect information, this is going to be a problem for indexing. For each one of these areas, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we learned and then the things we did to kind of resolve them. So the first thing we did here is that we didn't tell Googlebot, not the Googlebot, we didn't tell Googlebot when a change was happening to the site. So when we were changing the content or the price or a product, we didn't actually tell Googlebot what to do. So what we did is we gave every single page view a unique URL. And we also then, this is probably the most important part, we created code paths for every single route. So there's a lot of dynamic content. Some of it is, let's say you've got a decision tree and you only see content if you're in a local area. If you serve that with a status code of 200, but you forget to tell a local area that if they don't have that content and put a status code of 400, then that's going to create problems for the crawling there. So what we did is we created all those things. Sorry, catch myself for a second. So now that when the content changes, the site behaves like a multi-page site and everything crawls as expected. The second area is rendering. Now, a couple of complications here. We unknowingly hid a load of content behind interactions. So things like read more, which hidden would have to be made a call to the server to bring more information. But the biggest one was pricing. So the pricing strategy for our pens and pencils client was that they would only show the price once you'd chosen your local branch. which is a big problem for us. So the fix there, very simply, is we applied a national price that changed when you chose your branch. It's not awesome for a customer interaction, but it solved this particular problem. And also, any content that was sat behind, like a link, for example, behind an interaction, we served that on the page properly. Now, I think it stands to reason that if you haven't been able to properly call or render your site, your indexing is going to be a bit of a dog's dinner. Now, we had two main problems here. We'd used SSR, or server-side rendering, to serve up a whole bunch of content, but we only did it for the pages that we wanted Googlebot to crawl. So we only did it for PDP and PLP pages, but we didn't go deep enough. We had, for the PLPs, we had everything but the description and specifications, and for PDPs, we had everything but not content. The fix, well, it goes without saying really, we went through every single page and made sure that content was correct. But unfortunately, when we did a few spot checks, we didn't realize that our server-side rendering policy was our client-side rendering policy was overwriting our server-side rendering policy. So after we'd done all that work and we'd created this, somewhere back at the beginning part of the project where we had some holding copy in the JavaScript, we hadn't realized that that was still there, and we didn't go and fix it. We did some spot checks, we fixed what we did, then we had an SEO expert come and support us, and we realized that 99% of the content was still being overwritten. So the moral of the story is there, have someone who knows what they're doing at the beginning to help you, so you don't have to do it twice. Now, I said I'd give you 4 tips. These are a bit early on in the talk, granted. So here are the 4 things to take away when implementing single-page applications specifically. 1, treat all views as URLs, or every single page as with a URL. Give it a specific URL. Cover all code paths with status codes. Make sure you render all the content, excuse me, without requiring user interactions. And please, for your own sake and sanity, make sure your server-side rendering and client-side rendering policies actually match. Now, all in hindsight, that seems like fairly sensible stuff and fairly straightforward. It took us 3 months to work through that and unpick all those things. That's a really, really long time. And if you have a look here, it took probably a little bit longer than maybe 2 or 3 months. So in total, 4 or 5 months of poor traffic as a result of not doing this. I think I see some faces in the front here. That's bad. That's millions of pounds of lost revenue. So that's a really, really serious issue. And as you can see, it starts going up, and then actually over time, incrementally, those peaks and troughs started to improve as well. So it was really good that we kind of got through all that. You might be thinking that this is a nightmare story about headless and to steer well clear, don't go anywhere near it. Unfortunately, that's not the case. I think headless is here to stay. Now, you may be in the thick of doing something like this already, or you might not never experience it, but I'm fairly certain at some point in the future, you actually will. And I wouldn't wish those 3 months on anybody. The only thing that came out of that, we actually had a really stronger client relationship, but that's the best thing you can expect. The worst thing is that your client's exiting stage left, and you're left with a gap in your revenue. I seem to have rattled through this talk much faster than I thought I was going to be. Good thing now for you all is that you've heard this talk and you've got some tips and some information to help your client recover from such a problem, or even potentially stop this from happening in the future. And I urge you, remember Conway's Law. If you get wind of a client of yours doing something like this, try and muscle your way in. Show them this talk. Explain to them what you know and what you've heard me say. And don't just do it at the beginning of the project. Stick around for the whole ride. Stay there for the beginning, up for launch and beyond. And you never know, you might actually even be able to capitalise on opportunity to increase your organic traffic instead of just preventing it from tanking. Thank you very much.